You want to borrow this one?
I went back to the seminarians that I know and I said, you're requested to go on the phone. But they were holding it.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the University of St. Mary the Lake, Mundelein Seminary. Welcome to the Spring 2026 Paluch Lecture. My name is Brian Schmacek. I'm the Provost and Cardinal George Chair of Faith and Culture, and it's my great privilege to welcome you this evening. My first task is to introduce our seminarian who will be leading us in an opening prayer, Jimmy Venegas from the Diocese of El Paso.
Thank you. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Father, for this gift of having a lecture to learn more about Christian education as a key factor for Vatican II's future. We ask that you may send your Spirit to enlighten Bud in this presentation, and as well to prepare our hearts for all the information we'll receive. If there's any fear or worries, we ask that you may send your Spirit to free us from that. We ask this all through Christ our Lord.
Amen. Amen.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, this is our Spring 2026 Paluch Lecture. And I wanted to let those folks know who weren't here that this entire lecture series and our endowed lecturer, the chair in theology, was due to a gift, a very gift rooted in foresight by the Paluch family nearly 40 years ago. And we are very proud to welcome Mary Lou Paluch, who's a member of that family and who's with us here and who's also on our board. Thank you. She was speaking to me before the lecture about how her parents were very good friends with Cardinal Bernardine. And her mother got an invitation to attend a dinner with Cardinal Bernardine. And one of her priest friends said, "You better bring your checkbook." And that, as a result, we have the Paluch Chair of Theology. And tonight with us, we gather this evening for the lecture, which will be delivered by Dr. Harold Bud Horell. Dr. Horell's primary vocation is as a husband, father, and grandfather. His professional vocation is as a pastoral theologian and religious educator. Dr. Horell is Professor Emeritus at Fordham University in New York and is the current holder of the Margaret and Chester Paluch Chair in Theology here at the university. In this evening's presentation, Dr. Horell will discuss the Second Vatican Council, an event that has and continues to shape our church and our lives. He'll explore the guiding pastoral vision for the council articulated by Pope John XXIII and its connection to the Declaration on Christian Education, emphasizing the central role of education and faith formation in the Church's ongoing reception of the teachings of Vatican II. Dr. Horell.
Thank you for your introduction. I'd like to thank Jimmy for the prayer. When I came here a year and a half ago, Jimmy was the first seminarian I met when I arrived on campus. And thank you for the introduction. The Second Vatican Council was the 21st Ecumenical Council of the Roman Catholic Church. It began in December of 1962 and concluded in December of 1965. Like all the other ecumenical councils, it was a gathering of the Pope, bishops from around the world, and other religious leaders to guide the universal Roman Catholic Church. From a pastoral perspective, a council is a learning and teaching event within the church's everyday communal and ministerial life. Church leaders gather at a council to be together, to discuss and learn from one another, and guided by the Spirit, to draw on the collective wisdom of their shared history, traditions, and the conciliar discussions to address whatever crises, controversy, or issue the church faces. A council concludes when it presents what it has learned to guide the church. The documents produced by a council are referred to as its teachings. As Cardinal Supich has pointed out, it takes decades for the teachings of a council to be received and appropriated so that they become part of the fabric of the church's everyday life. Vatican II was the most significant event in the church in our lifetimes. All of our lives have been shaped by the council, the ways we worship, the ways we understand and celebrate the sacraments, the ways we think about the relationships between clergy and laity, and the relationships between Catholics and Christians of other denominations, and between Catholics and Jews, Muslims, and people of other faiths, and our understanding of how the church can and should relate to the broader world have all been shaped by Vatican II. The Second Vatican Council laid the foundation for the reinstituting of the permanent diaconate and has shaped the church in many other ways as well. Additionally, as noted in the introduction, I hold the Margaret and Chester Paluch chair. Chester Paluch was inspired by Vatican II to begin publishing the Missalette to assist members of parishes in the United States to learn the Mass in English. Although 60 years have passed since the close of the Second Vatican Council, we are still integrating the teachings of the Council into the fabric of the Church's everyday life. We are still receiving the Church's teachings into the Church. The title of this evening's presentation is The Declaration of Christian Education, a Key to Vatican II's Future. The Declaration on Christian Education was the 9th of 16 documents approved by the Second Vatican Council and promulgated by Pope Paul VI. My thesis is that the Declaration on Christian Education can serve as a guide to the further reception of the Second Vatican Council's teachings. The Latin title of the Declaration on Christian Education is Gravissimum Educationis. I will refer to this document and the other documents from Rome by their English titles. And I want to pause here and offer a personal reflection, but also a confession. For over 40 years, I've been reflecting on the reception of the Second Vatican Council's teachings and how they have and how they continue to enrich the Church. When I think about the ongoing reception of the teachings of Vatican II, there is one thing of which I am certain. We have not yet fully received the teachings of the Council into the Church. They haven't yet fully come to be woven into the pastoral life of the Church. However, and this is my confession, I do not know what the Church would be like if it were to embrace fully the teachings of the Council. When I think about receiving the teachings of Vatican II more fully into the Church, I have more questions than answers, more uncertainties than certainties. Hence, in this evening's presentation, I will invite you to reflect with me on Vatican II, on teaching and education, on how Vatican II's teachings can be embraced more fully. I want to hear your thoughts and share some of my own. My hope is that in our time together, we will come to a clear understanding of how the teachings of Vatican II can enable us to be better able to welcome and work to bring about the full realization of God's reign, God's saving grace and life-sustaining presence in our lives, our church, and the world. As a next step in our journey together this evening, I invite you to engage in a few brief reflection exercises. So I just ask you just to relax for a minute and just sort of settle into the space, clear your mind, let go of whatever cares and worries of the day you brought with you, and just be present in this space. So take a moment just to maybe take a few deep breaths in, and as you breathe out, let go of the cares and worries of the day. As you breathe in, center yourself in the presence of our God, who is always present to us. Take a moment for reflection. So I have a question for you, just to take a moment for reflection. What comes to mind when you think of the Second Vatican Council? Just take a few moments for silent reflection. I invite you to turn to a neighbor and just, each of you just share for maybe a minute. And to break things up, we have some of our lay faculty and students here and seminarians at the table behind them. Could we mix it up a little bit, have our students from our school pair off with some seminarians for conversation? What? you have the mic?
I do. Over there, so you want to get, so I'll get up and.
If you could plan to bring your conversation to a close in about a minute. All right, I ask you to bring your conversation to a close. We don't have time to hear from everyone tonight, but I wonder if we could just have maybe 3 people share something from your conversation with a neighbor. Who would like to share something from your conversation with your neighbor about what came to mind when you thought of Vatican II? Wait till we get the mic to you. Oh,
Thank you. My name is Greg, Archdiocese of Chicago. I sat with Carol, who also lives in the Archdiocese of Chicago, and one of the things she remarked about was being a young girl when Vatican II came out and how excited her grandparents and parents were when it came out. Both things they were scared about, things they were happy about, but there's generally a lot of excitement because the church did change in some pretty significant ways, and large change in the church is rare, as we know historically. These large councils don't come around maybe every 2-3 centuries, right? So to live through something like that, it's like living through the new millennium, 2000. You know, we only had 2 of those since Jesus was born. So, but the others, and then what I shared was Carol really liked the Church in the Modern World document, and then one of my favorites is Dave Arabum. I think it just captures Scripture really well, and it's just a really nice write-up to read to integrate Bible and tradition.
thank you. So the excitement of the council was something that was shared, and hopefully today we can still have some of that excitement as we continue to receive the teachings of the council into the church. And we talk about it as something new, but it was really, at its heart, it was an affirmation of our core Christian, some of our core Catholic beliefs, but then looking at how we could express them in a way that would capture the imagination of people today.
We talked about 2 things, this resistance and reception. So whenever a new thing is being introduced, there's always going to be 2 sides of the coin, someone resisting and someone receiving it. And I think Cardinal Supich was right in saying that it takes a while, or maybe for some people a lifetime, for this Vatican II to be actually part of the fabric of our church. So up to now, we're still some people are arguing about it, but I think most of us right now are open to the reception of all the things that is part of Vatican II.
Thank you. Very astute comment. That there, as you say, it's always resistance on the one hand and sort of acceptance on the other. We see something similar today with synodality in the church. Some people push back against it and some people embrace it wholeheartedly. And it was certainly that way with the council, and it's still that way with the teachings of the council in many ways. So thank you. One more. Linda. Now I'm getting nervous. She always asks tough questions.
We just talked about the universal call to holiness and how interesting it is that that whole concept, if you will, wasn't really a thing. And there's so many things that we take for granted now. And so sometimes it's really interesting to look at what was Vatican II responding to, and what things do we take for granted now as just being, the universal call to holiness. I mean, that was a new thing. So that was kind of the gist of our conversation.
Okay, thank you. Yes. So let's go on. Another reflection exercise for you. Again, just take a moment to sort of clear your mind again. We're going to go in a little bit of a different direction. So just take a moment to clear your mind, and then I have another reflection question for you. So what comes to mind when you think of education, teaching, learning, catechesis, religious education, Catholic Christian education, faith formation? All words we use in the church to talk about education in faith. What comes to mind when you think about these words? When you think about your experiences of catechesis, faith formation, or however it was called, in your education in Christian faith? Take a moment for reflection. Once again, turn to a neighbor for just a couple minutes of conversation. Once again, if you could bring your conversation to a close in about a minute. So if we could bring your conversation to a close. I hear lots of lively conversation. I'd like to invite, again, just three people to share something from your conversation. 3 different people. Who do we have? Well, we could have 3. We'll give. Who would like to share? Back here?
I've got one.
Oh, you got one.
You gave me one. We actually spoke a little bit about, because we both have experience with faith-based schools, and we spoke a little bit about the 3-legged stool that you often hear about in the church, and how that same principle holds true for faith-based schools, in that the parents and God and the teachers work together to support the student, and how we found that in public schools that was not there, and that public schools tend to fail the student in some ways, because I've taught both in private faith-based schools and in public schools, and about how even in faith-based schools we have to be very careful to choose the correct one, because they don't all support the student as a result of that 3-legged stool. Something is missing. The parents aren't working with the teachers, or God is not involved in the process as much as he should be as well.
Yeah, you're pointing out something that's really central to Catholic education, and that's that parents are considered the primary educators of their children, in the ways of the world, but also in the ways of faith, and that parents, as educators, should be rooted in faith, rooted in prayer, and bring their children to that same sense of always being rooted in prayer. So thank you. Someone else. Peggy.
Thank you. Okay, this is on. Wow, this is great. Shucks. One of the things that was kind of talked about a little bit here was just the reality of, I've experienced this myself whenever I've taught young people, where you kind of say, open the page or open the book up to page 25, and you just see the eyes glaze over immediately. And there's this reality, I think, in catechesis that I was just kind of meditating on when we were just taking this time, that the myth that we find foundational necessarily affects the rest of our reality, not just how we perceive ourselves, but how we interact with others. And so I'm using the word myth kind of loosely here, but our faith has a tangible effect on how we live. And if I can, as a person that's going to be educating people, invite people to engage in a reality of imagination that takes them into something higher, a higher way of living, I think that's very inspiring. Because not only do I desire greatness for myself, I'm sure that all of us desire that as well, but that people can, respond to that. I think that's the core of kind of what I was kind of sharing here with the group, is that I think there's this inspiration to have imagination, and then this freedom that happens out of that as well. There's time to hit the books, but a moment of just, I want to engage this because it is for my good, and it's a good in and of itself. So I think that was kind of one thing we were talking about.
So you're also, I think, highlighting core aspects of Catholic education, that Catholic education has what we often talk about as a realist epistemology. It's about understanding the truths about the world as it actually exists. And we also talk, central to the Catholic approach to education is a focus on the imagination. We even talk about the Catholic imagination. It's centered in reality, but looking at how God's at work in the world, calling us to the more, the greater, the fuller realization of God's kingdom and reign in the world. So thank you. We have one more here.
Thank you. For those who don't know me, my name is Brother Kevin. And we, in our group, we spoke, the four of us all had different backgrounds, and so we had a wide range of exposure to Catholic topics. Naomi came into the church as an adult in 2005, and she clearly was on her journey and everything that she was exposed to that brought her heart to that. But she also had a certain lamentation about a certain lack of resources, or just this desire to learn more than she had exposure to. Hopefully I'm capturing that well, yes. And both Gregory and I grew up Catholic, but both lamented that we didn't really have the greatest catechesis. That I was, personally, I always felt like I was, as a kid, exposed to what I always kind of characterized as coloring book Jesus. That he's good, he's your friend, he's your buddy, and you need to be nice to people, which these are wonderful, great things, but there's I think we can be honest and adult about this, oftentimes a lack of true challenging of children, and not giving even just the lay faithful in general enough credit for how much they desire to know and their capacity to learn. And there's oftentimes we have this temptation to overly simplify things for the lay faithful, and for all of us, when what's really there is this wellspring that we can constantly draw from. That there's no limit to the depth, and it's good to the extent that we can tap into that and make that accessible for everyone.
Well said. I mean, there are lots of ways. We unfortunately, we don't often, or the church has often fallen in the trap of not educating children well. Or adopting approaches that don't really work. But I think we have the resources today to educate well. We know from all kinds of research that children are capable of great spiritual experiences, and their intuitive understanding of the world and of God can often be very deep. And so if we understand how children look at the world, we can do faith formation to children well. Thank you for sharing. Keep all that in mind. Keep your thoughts of your understandings of of Vatican II and of education in mind, and really all I say to your own experiences, and think about what you might take away that will help you understand Vatican II better and understand the dynamics of education and Christian faith. Before proceeding, I want to offer you just a brief outline of where we go from here. We'll turn next to Pope John the 23rd and examine his vision for Vatican II at the Council's outset to provide a baseline for analysis. In Part 3, we'll turn to the Declaration on Christian Education and consider the document's preparation, the teaching it presents, and different evaluative perspectives about it. I will argue that if we take a fresh look at the document today, a fresh look at the Declaration on Christian Education, we can recognize that it can be a guide for understanding more fully how Vatican II was a learning and teaching event, an educational event. In Part 4, we will examine how the Declaration of Christian Education can serve as a guide for the ongoing reception of Vatican II. In this final part of the presentation, we'll draw insight from Pope Leo XIV's apostolic letter, drawing new maps of hope, a reflection our Pope issued recently to mark the 60th anniversary of the promulgation of the Declaration of Christian Education. So we'll turn now to Pope John the 23rd, and we'll end with our current Pope Leo. On October 28, 1958, Angelo Cardinal Roncalli was elected Pope. He took the name John the 23rd. 3 months later, on January 25th, 1959, at a meeting with a small group of cardinals, Pope John announced that he would convoke a new ecumenical council. Pope John discussed his vision for Vatican II in his opening address to the council. Where there is much to learn from this remarkable address, I will limit my analysis to 3 main points. First, Pope John states in the address, a positive proof of the Catholic Church's vitality is furnished by every single council held in the long course of the centuries, by the 20 ecumenical councils, as well as the many thousands of memorable regional and provincial ones emblazoned on the scroll of history. In making this statement, Pope John affirmed that councils and other synodal gatherings are integral to the Church. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, the Church was characterized by strong papal leadership. When John announced the convocation of Vatican II, some church leaders responded that they considered ecumenical councils obsolete. They thought the Church could operate more efficiently and effectively if the Pope identified issues, consulted with people throughout the Church, and then decided and announced how the Church would proceed from there. In contrast, John believed that for the Church to move forward and be as fruitful as it could be, the bishops of the world needed to consult with the people of their diocese, then come together to talk with one another, and then for the Pope and the bishops to offer a vision of how the Church can and should move forward. Pope John thought that the Church could offer a richer, more inspiring witness to the gospel if its teaching was informed by insights of Catholics from throughout the world and synodal discussions about synodal discussions about how to form people to view contemporary life in the light of Christian faith. Second, John called for a fresh approach to how the Church presents its teachings. In the past, ecumenical councils often taught in a juridical way. They were like legal proceedings. Church leaders considered issues and then issued judgments, that is, decisions about how the issues were to be addressed. In his opening address, John stated that Vatican II should strive to express the truth of faith with the accuracy and precision that characterized the proceedings of the Church at the Councils of Trent and in the First Vatican Council. However, he also called for the Second Vatican Council to go beyond past councils by offering a vision of a more fully human life that could inspire people to grow morally and spiritually. Pope John called for a fresh approach. His call for a fresh approach prompted the Second Vatican Council to adopt what church historian John O'Malley called a new rhetorical style. Rather than issuing juridical pronouncements, Vatican II offered a vision of an ideal church and an ideal world and sought to inspire people to strive to realize these ideals. Third, in his opening address, John promoted visible unity in the truth. He stated, my slides got a little messed up, but I'll see. Okay. In his opening address, John promoted visible unity in the truth. He stated, "There is, first of all, that unity of Catholics among themselves, which must always be kept steadfast and exemplary. There is also a unity of prayer and ardent longing, prompting Christians separated from this apostolic see to aspire to union with us. And finally, there is a unity which consists in the esteem and respect shown for the Catholic Church by members of various non-Christian religions." The first thing to notice about this passage is Pope John's call for unity among Catholics. Earlier in the address, Pope John stated that he hoped the Council would introduce timely changes and a prudent system of mutual cooperation within the Church. He did not advocate for eliminating distinctions between clergy and laity or eliminating divisions among those involved in different ministries. Instead, he suggested there should be prudent mutual cooperation throughout the Church and all its members. The Church should recognize that it has many members, but is one body. Note also that in the passage, John spoke of other Christians and people of non-Christian religions reaching out to the Catholic Church. The passage suggested that God is at work in the lives of people of faith who are not members of the Catholic Church, and that non-Catholics are capable of recognizing and responding to what is true and good, and that we as Catholics should seek to stand in unity with all people of sincere faith who are not members of the Church, because they have that natural ability to recognize what's good and true. In the paragraph after the passage John just quoted, Pope John added one more point to his discussion of unity. He noted, "The Church sheds her light everywhere," and he urged us to stand in unity with the whole human family. A few months after delivering this address, Pope John coined a phrase to describe this final kind of unity. He called it unity with all people of goodwill. In his discussion of unity, Pope John suggested a new standpoint for reflection. Up to this point, the primary standpoint for reflection was the standpoint of the Church above the world, the Church stepping back to evaluate events in the world from a critically reflective perspective. In contrast, in his opening address, Pope John argued for the Church to envision itself as standing in the midst of the world with all people of sincere faith and goodwill. In June 1963, Pope John the 23rd died and was succeeded by Pope Paul VI. Pope John's opening address had already set the tone for the council. Since John the 23rd's vision for the council, then after that, John the 23rd's vision for the council guided Paul VI as he presided over the council's remaining sessions. If you have studied the history and documents of Vatican II, you know that many of the key ideas of the documents resonate with or echo the themes expressed by Pope John's opening address. In fact, there is a wealth of scholarly literature on this issue. Before we move on, I just want to pause just for a moment. This is just for personal reflection. Just what strikes you? As you hear John's vision for the council, what thoughts, feelings, impressions arise within you? We won't discuss this, but I just ask you to think about it. To my knowledge, the connections between the Declaration on Christian Education and Pope John's vision for Vatican II, and the connections between the Declaration on Christian Education and other documents of the Council have not been explored. And I would like to explore some of these connections in this part of my presentation and connect it up with what I had said before about John's vision for the Council. When bishops were asked to propose topics for Vatican II, issues concerning Catholic schools were raised frequently enough that the Council's planners decided to draft a document on Catholic schools. However, as the initial draft documents were discussed, it became increasingly clear that any statement of the Church's outlook on teaching, learning, and education needed to consider more than Catholic schools. While Catholic schools were considered important, what the Church saw was that they were not the only means for educating in faith. The participants in the Council came to realize that for the Church to inspire people of all ages to grow morally and spiritually and to carry their faith into all aspects of their lives, it needed to go beyond a focus on Catholic schools and address the importance of faith formation in families, in the education of Catholics in parishes from childhood through all stages of adult life. The Church also needed to consider how it could educate its members to seek fullness of life and unity with people of all faiths and people of goodwill. The first of 3 drafts of the document on Catholic schools were only reviewed and discussed by the writing committee and the Pope. Although the writing committee still had many questions and concerns about the 4th draft, it was sent to all the bishops for comment. In dialogue with the bishops, 2 more drafts of the document were prepared and reviewed that incorporated a focus on Catholic education broadly understood. But then at the beginning of the 3rd session of the Council, the bishops discussed the 6th draft of the document and decided to transform it from a document on Catholic schools into a document on Catholic education. At this point, a tension arose within the discussions. On the one hand, some Council participants advocated for developing a comprehensive statement that explored all aspects of Christian education. On the other hand, some bishops noted that Vatican II had already occupied much of their time, and they needed to turn their attention to issues in their local churches. Other Council participants also noted that they needed to limit discussions of Christian education so they could complete work on other documents, including the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World. As a compromise, the Council decided to draft a document that addressed the importance of education and articulated 2 fundamental educational principles. First principle concerns the right to education, and the second one concerns the right to Christian education. And we look at the principles, we can see how they were influenced by the vision for the Council that John the 23rd articulated. The bishops decided that at some point in the future, the Church could explore these basic principles more fully. The final approved document, now known as the Declaration on Christian Education, was the 8th produced by the writing committee. Additionally, there were various requests to clarify passages in the document and to develop aspects of the analysis of education in the document more fully. But these issues were not addressed simply because of time constraints. In commenting on the Declaration of Christian Education, religious educator Jane Regan called it a weak document. Somewhat similarly, spiritual writer M. Basil Pennington wrote, "The declaration concerning Christian education touches on a matter of greatest importance, yet does so in a rather prosaic and uninspiring way. If you have read the document on the Declaration on Christian Education, and just take it at face value, you might be inclined to agree with these valuations. In many ways, it's not a very exciting document. However, I want to offer you a contrasting interpretation of the Declaration of Christian Education. I suggest that we think of this declaration as a masterwork of art, a beautiful painting. The difficulty with the document lies in the fact that it's unfinished. It offers a basic sketch, but some lines are incomplete, and the work lacks paint to provide color and texture. Yet we can complete the sketch in this work of art and add color and texture if we consider the document in relation to the other documents of Vatican II and the guiding vision for the Council that Pope John XXIII presented in his opening address to the Council. Again, due to time constraints, I will limit my analysis to a few central points. First, consider the introduction. When the document's focus shifted from Catholic schools to education, the Working Committee revised the introduction. In the revised introduction, the first sentence states that the Council has given careful consideration to education because of its importance in people's lives and its influence on society. In the second sentence, the Council indicated that their review of the circumstances of our times led them to recognize the necessity of addressing the issue of education. The second sentence echoes the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World, Article 4, in which the Church contends that, in which the Council contends that the Church carries the responsibility of reading the signs of the times and interpreting them in the light of the gospel. Hence, the Council chose to issue a document on Christian education because it recognized the importance and necessity of education as a sign of the times in the modern world and felt a responsibility to address it in the light of faith. The analysis in the introduction of the Declaration on Christian Education lacks clarity. However, careful reading reveals the flow of thought. The Council notes that in the modern era, people have more opportunities for education and a greater desire for it. Given the complexities of the modern world, people need an education that enables them to address the challenges of modern life. Because education is essential to human flourishing, people also have a right to it. That's the basic argument that's outlined in the introduction. Unfortunately, many commentaries on the document focus only on the introduction's assertion that all people have a right to education. Yet, attempting to understand the introduction to the Declaration of Christian Education by focusing only on this assertion is like reading only the last line of a story and expecting to understand it. We can gain a clearer understanding of the introduction to the Declaration of Christian Education and its significance by noting that its structure parallels the structure of the introduction to the Decree on the Apostolate of Lay People. The first sentence of the Decree on the Apostolate for Lay People identifies the lay apostolate as an important issue to consider. The second sentence of that introduction, using language that is similar to the language used in the second sentence of the Declaration on Christian Education, comments on increased involvement of the lay apostolate in the church as a sign of the times. Among the decrees and declarations, the DCE and the DALP are the only two documents that characterize the issues being discussed as a sign of the times. In considering this fact, we might ask, In striving to embrace the teachings of the Second Vatican Council more fully today, should we perhaps pay special attention to its teaching on the importance of promoting education and its teachings on the apostolate of the laity? Additionally, could we embrace more fully Pope John Paul's call to foster greater unity in the Church by focusing on forming and educating lay women and men to have a deeper understanding of Christian faith so that they are prepared to engage in synodal dialogue with ordained ministers that aim to foster bonds of unity and shared responsibility for the mission of the Church? Should we strive to foster education throughout the human community so that people throughout the world are better prepared to discuss issues and forge what Pope John Paul called bonds of visible unity in the truth? Article 1 of the Declaration on Christian Education contends that the inalienable right to education can be respected by offering education to promote true unity and peace in the world, education that forms and directs people toward their final end and the good of their society. In the context in which this is presented, we can envision what they're talking about here as spiritual and moral formation in education. 3, prudent sex education, and education for open dialogue with others that enables them to work to promote the common good. All of these areas of education are important. Merely listing them in the Declaration of Christian Education has not inspired many members of the Church or many local churches to embrace the Church's educational ministry wholeheartedly. However, we can look to other documents of the Second Vatican Council to find insights that enable us to sketch missing lines and add color and texture to the Declaration on Christian Education as a beautiful work of art. For example, education for world responsibility and human solidarity is discussed in the Pastoral Constitution on the Church in the Modern World. And expanding what the Declaration on Christian Education states about the importance of religious education and open dialogue, the Declaration on Religious Liberty, the Declaration of the Church to non-Christian religions, especially paragraphs 2 and 3, as well as other Vatican II documents could be key resources. Such further development of the Declaration on Christian Education's teachings on education could then provide a guide for the further implementation of many of the teachings of the Second Vatican Council. Article 2 of the Declaration on Christian Education discusses the right of Christians to Christian education. Unfortunately, it does not explore the dynamics of education and faith clearly, nor does it connect with other discussions of education and faith in other Vatican II documents. The teachings in this part of the Declaration could be developed more fully, however, by connecting what is said in Article 3 with the discussion of faith formation and the dogmatic constitution on the Church, and the discussion of the importance of liturgical education in the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy. In bringing this section to close, I want to return to my main point. I am suggesting that if we flesh out the teachings of the Declaration of Christian Education by connecting them with the guiding vision of the Council and the teachings of other Vatican II documents, we can develop a better understanding of the importance of the Church's educational ministry and recognize how embracing the educational ministry of the Church at a a deeper level can enable us to receive the teachings of Vatican II more fully into the church. Again, just pause. And I've gone through a lot in a very quick time, so what did you hear in my discussion of the Declaration of Christian Education? What stood out for you? And given your life in ministry, why do you think what stood out for you stood out? So what did you hear? What does it mean for you? And how can you connect what you heard with your life in ministry? Take a moment for reflection. The last part of the presentation, and I promise I'll be brief. I know you're getting tired. I'm getting tired. When I think about the church's educational ministry, and I think of all the areas of that educational ministry that Vatican II highlighted, I always find it to be a bit overwhelming. The church calls for liturgical education, family faith formation, adult education in parishes, education for cooperation between clergy and laity, education to work for world peace. It's overwhelming when you think about the broad vision of education and the call to educate that the Second Vatican Council offers. But we can find some guidance on how to embrace this broad vision by turning to our current Pope, who, in all that he's said and done so far, he's shown that he has an in-depth understanding of Vatican II. And that includes an in-depth understanding of the Declaration on Christian Education. And he makes a suggestion for how we can embrace this broad vision of education that the Council offers. He said we think of all these different areas as education, as creating an educational constellation. They are like points of light. And the task, the educational task, and it involves going beyond schooling models, is to see how within our particular personal and communal situation we can connect some of these points of light, some of these educational constellations like stars in the sky. How do we connect them from where we stand? And he talks about this in terms of a choreography of education. He says it's the educational practice, educational pedagogy has to be kind of like a dance where we sort of think we need to be here, but we also need to be here. We need to be addressing ecumenical education, but we also need to be addressing fostering synodal conversations in the church. He's saying not every community is going to be engaging all the constellations, but within our communities where we live, there are going to be certain constellations that's going to be important for us to address. And if we address them, he says, what we create are maps of hope. Maps of hope where we embrace that enable us to embrace the teachings of the Council, bring them to bear in our personal and communal lives, and then in that way receive the teachings of the council more fully into the church. Now, let me give you one practical example that might help to make this clearer. A lot of pedagogy in the church is what I call straight line pedagogy. It's what we have in the post-Vatican II era is experts in seminaries, universities, colleges, Catholic colleges, who know a lot about one particular area, people that are experts in ecumenical dialogue, or people that are experts in liturgy, or people that are experts in any of these other areas. And usually the way we educate is we bring in somebody that has expertise, and they share their expertise with us. And if we're lucky, they'll give us sort of the theology and the theory, and then they'll suggest a couple of pastoral applications, and then they'll ask for questions. And the questions are supposed to be that time for like personal appropriation. That's kind of a hit or miss way of educating. Maybe people will hear what the expert's saying and be able to relate it to their life. Maybe they won't. It's kind of hit or miss. What Pope Leo says is we need to be much more intentional about seeing all these points of light that the church offers us and thinking about which one of those are important for us to address in our community, and then work on connecting them. So he says the education and faith should be more like a dance than following a straight line. One way to think about this dance is like, what's the center for education? It's where's the integration take place? It takes place in persons and communities. So how do we identify those issues that will help people to understand and live the faith more fully in the communities to which they belong? So that's the sort of the belonging aspect of education. How then we educate people to appropriate what they're learning into their lives so that they become more fully the person they're called to be by God. And then how do we connect with the beliefs of the church? If we're anchored in personal and communal growth, then we can connect with the beliefs of the church as life-giving beliefs that can be guides for us. And then, in embracing those beliefs, how do we embrace them in a way that takes us beyond where we are so that we can imagine the fuller realization of God's reign, God's peace and justice in our lives and in the world? That we need to re-envision education as a kind of a dance rather than just a straight line. We have to be thinking about inviting people to integrate into their person, into who they are as persons, into their community, insights from these educational constellations so that over time we form a church that embraces ever more fully the vision of the Second Vatican Council. So many more questions and ideas and could be asked, but I'll stop there and just invite you to take a moment for reflection and then to comment or question or critique what you just heard. Who would like to comment? I put you all to sleep, right?
I'm Father Dan Buck, retired from this archdiocese, and I I think the job in front of us is a daunting one, because the educational system that I knew and that I grew up with is dying. During Catholic Schools Week, this diocese announced 5 more schools closing. Wasn't a very good message for the week, but it happened. Also, my brother is a retired Christian brother, De La Salle Christian brother. Their ministry is mostly in high schools and colleges. And I just got a report last week that the average age of the brothers in this country is 77 years old. Chicago hasn't had a new candidate for the brothers in about 5 years. So the system that we have is dying, and it's going to fall on you folks and the people you work with to find a new one. And, you know, I'm not lamenting what happened before, but it's gone. And I think talking like this might help us to look forward to something different.
I do think we need something different, but at the same time, I still think there's a place for Catholic schools. We just need to not put all of our hopes in one form of education. It's also how we educate in Catholic schools. The Declaration on Christian Education actually has a very fruitful discussion of Catholic schools, drawing from other, from insights from other documents. They talk about we should educate students in Catholic schools to be like yeast, who then go out and become yeast in the world to transform the world. That at the core of the discussion of Catholic schools in the Declaration on Christian Education, we find actually the core notion of catechesis. What's catechesis? The word catechesis means to echo within. And so it was a term that originated in the 3rd century of the church. So education in the church at that time was hearing the proclamation of the gospel until it echoed within. But once it echoed within, it led you out into the world to live your faith. And so that education of faith has to be involved both personal and social transformation. And that's the vision that of Catholic school education articulated in the Decree on Christian Education. And I think it still can be a useful guide, a useful ideal today. And thinking again that following from John the 23rd's opening address, the council aimed at presenting that ideal for Christian life in whatever topic they were addressing, and meant to inspire people to try to then go out and embrace and live toward that ideal.
Thank you, but honestly, this is really beautiful, and the ideal is very profound. However, I just think the reality is that most Catholic schools, grade schools and high schools, do not have this reality, do not have this ideal. And that's why I think to build off Father here, that it's a dying system. I mean, we see more and more Catholic schools closing one after the other, and population is constantly decreasing. However, I see the schools like Chesterton Academy and follow a classical model, which honestly, in my opinion, incorporates this vision very well. It incorporates the holistic aspect of the person in a true liberal arts education. And to be honest with you, I feel like that, and I would hope you could speak into it a little bit, a classical education like Chesterton Academy, which is now across the entire United States and is growing, they have wait lists for their enrollments. Both other models that are similar to on a grade school level and then the high school level for Chesterton. And I don't know, more and more you look at certain Catholic high schools here in the Archdiocese, it's very difficult to see what the actual difference is between paying maybe $20,000 a year to go to Loyola Academy compared to going to my high school, New Trier High School, for free and having the same education and actually having more people leave my public high school believing in God than actually at Loyola not believing in God. And so that's just been my experience, and I just feel like we do need to think something. How are we incorporating this ideal? It's beautiful. This is awesome. This is what I would hope we're being formed in. And I think Chesterton Academy and classical education really offers that foundation. So if you could speak into that a little bit, if you agree or not, I'd greatly appreciate hearing you.
Well, you say, where are Catholic schools thriving? And it's where we can identify a need. Many parts of the country, we have good public schools, not perfect, but good. And Catholics send their kids to those schools because, they get if they feel they're comfortable with the education, they feel they can provide the faith formation that the schools don't. So, and we should encourage parents to make that choice to educate their kids where they see best and support them in doing that. But then there are places where we find a real need, where we see they're sort of more and more their niche markets. One of them is in school systems or in areas where the public school system has become too secularized or too kind of watered down, a good classical education. Another place where Catholic schools thrive are like the Cristo Rey schools, where the public schools in poor areas don't offer good education because they don't have the resources, but Catholic schools can go into there. We also see Catholic schools thriving and sometimes thriving, and we see it here in Chicago, in neighborhoods that are plagued by violence. A Catholic school can come in and be a transformative influence. I think one of the most inspiring stories of Catholic education that I know of is not from this country, but from a tiny little country, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Who knows where Bosnia-Herzegovina is? That's where the Balkan War was, where you had three religious ethnic groups fighting with one another. Fighting's been going on for centuries. It's Croatian Catholics, Bosnian Muslims, is it, and Serbian Orthodox. And at the end of, I guess it was in the 90s, there was a 6-year war that was very violent, very bloody, and there was they finally, they come up with a peace accord. What the Catholic Church in Bosnia and Herzegovina did after the war ended was to open schools and invited the children of all three groups to come and be educated together. And I had students at Fordham who were educators, came to get their degrees in religious education, working in the Catholic schools in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And one of my students told me that he could look at his class and he could see students in his class who were best friends, whose parents were out fighting each other in the street 10 to 15 years before. So Catholic schools can be an effective way to educate, can contribute to the church's ability to minister and to witness to the faith, but we need to be much more selective about how we employ them and look to where there's real needs for that and support them in those areas.
Thank you. I think one thing, we have a lot of power in this room, I believe, to help with this issue in Chicago. I agree that, like, institutional Catholic schools, we don't have the priests, we don't have the nuns to really educate at the level of Catholicism that we used to. But what we do have is Mundelein, and we do graduate a lot of laypersons through the Splee School. And so I think one practical way we can do is when we leave here, or even starting now, to get involved in the religious education classes, to be a teacher for a 3rd grade, for an 8th grade, or to be a religious ed teacher at one of these Catholic schools, because we receive a really good education here at Mundelein, and so then it's incumbent on us to pass that education to the people in the schools. And I know a lot of people in Splee already have or do volunteer in religious education, and I just think that's a humble yet great ministry to really educate young people in Catholicism.
So we certainly have a place for Catholic schools, but then we have a place for faith formation, religious education programs in parishes as well, right? But again, I think the key to having successful religious education programs in parishes is to think beyond the classroom model. Think beyond having parents dropping kids off and they're in the classroom. That we need to think of parents. Parents always first and primary educators of their children, so there has to be, any program has to have that family component to it. That we have to think about, so talked earlier about faith education is not just conceptual, so how are we connecting them with liturgy and helping students root themselves in prayer and communal worship? How do we help them to understand the call to service as a person of faith? And so we have to have holistic, if we're to educate effectively and have a vibrant faith community, we need to think of holistic models of education where we're bringing together different educational constellations to create maps of hope. Margaret.
Hello. Okay. First of all, I want to thank you, the Paluch family members, for making this available to us. And thank you, Dr. Horell, for this opportunity. When you said that you put us to sleep, to me, it was totally the opposite. I feel in my whole being the Spirit working. So many things came to mind. But especially just what you said right now. The schools might be closing. There's so many things going on in the world, but it is up to us to read the signs of the times. I'm a student in the MAPS program, and I'm very excited about finishing and go out and do something for others. But especially, we need to be open to the Holy Spirit, because if we are not citizens of hope in this world, I think we are in the wrong room. We need to be who God called us to be. And we are light and salt of the earth, and we need to be really attentive to what God is telling us to do. We are mere channels of His grace. And I know we might not have vocations, nuns, or brothers, but we have a lot of ladies involved right now, and in so many ways. I know as a woman, the Walking with Purpose program, the School for Women, they have many women trying to know God, to get closer to Him, and there's the lack of facilitators for these groups. So I think we are in a happy place. Thank you so much for this presentation, who stirs in us. I don't know, at least in myself, I can speak for everybody, but it stirs in our hearts the desire to serve God and read besides the schools and all the other ways of education. We need to be open to new ideas, to new methods, and keep going. We won't see what we're doing right now, we won't be able to see it, but the new generations will see what John 23 tried to tell us in his
Thank you.
counsel.
Thank you very
So
much.
thank you so much.
Well, with that, we really want to thank Dr. Horell for this spring Paluch lecture, and recognizing Mary Lou Paluch herself for being here as a representative.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
We hope you have a good rest of the evening and hope to see you again in the fall for the fall Paluch lecture. Thank you.